Hello and welcome to the Sidebar, presented by True Crime Daily, taking you inside the courtrooms of high-profile and notorious cases from across the country. I'm your host, Joshua Ritter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer based in Los Angeles and previously an LA County prosecutor for nearly a decade. You can find me on all social media at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. We're recording this on Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. In this week's episode, a former TikToker takes the stand in his double murder trial for the shooting deaths of his wife and her male companion. Plus, prosecutors rest their case against a father charged with the murder of his 6-year-old son, with both sides clashing over the boy's manner of death. But first, allegations continue to pile up against Sean Diddy Combs as disturbing footage of an alleged assault perpetrated by the rapper surfaces online. Today, we're very excited to be joined by Neama Rahmani, a personal injury attorney and the president and co-founder of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Neama is a legal analyst and a commentator you can catch on Court TV, Law and Crime, and many other networks. Neama, welcome back. It's been way too long.
Thanks for having me, Josh. It has been. I'm excited. We have a lot to cover today.
We do have a lot to cover, and I feel like I've already heard your thoughts on many of these cases we're going to be talking about, because every time I turn on the TV, there's Neama telling me how what he thinks about the case already. So I'm glad that we got a chance to have you on the show again. Always appreciate these conversations, and always because I feel like you bring such a thoughtful perspective to the cases. And one of them, the first one we're going to talk about, is one that I know that you've been following very closely. It is involving a hip-hop mogul is facing additional allegations of sexual misconduct as disturbing footage comes to light, which appears to depict him assaulting his then partner. Allegations against Sean Diddy Combs have been mounting since November of last year, when his former girlfriend, Cassandra, also known as Cassie Ventura, filed a lawsuit accusing the entrepreneur of a decade-long pattern of sexual and physical abuse. While the lawsuit was ultimately settled a day after the filing, additional alleged victims filed lawsuits over the following months, eventually culminating in a Homeland Security raid on Diddy's homes in Miami and Los Angeles as part of a sex trafficking investigation. Video footage surfaced last week from an incident at an LA hotel where a towel-clad Diddy appears to chase down Cassie, who has her bags packed, perhaps in an attempt to escape, before the rapper throws her to the ground, beating and kicking the woman before dragging her down a hallway. Diddy has since issued an apology video regarding the incident. While he doesn't mention Cassie's name in the video, he takes responsibility for the actions and claims to be disgusted by his behavior. However, in the wake of the surveillance video and apology, another accuser has come forward claiming that Diddy approached the then 17-year-old model with enticements of furthering her career before allegedly forcing her to perform sex acts on him. While lawsuits continue to pile up against Diddy, he has not been charged criminally and roundly rejects the allegations leveled against him. All right, that was a mouthful. There's a lot going on for Diddy. But first, in regards to this last video, the DA's office in Los Angeles has already come out and said, Neama, that they are closing the book on any kind of criminal filing here because it's beyond the statute of limitations. My question, though, is does that mean that that's the end of Diddy's problems for this video, or do you think it could be used in another way?
Josh, I think Diddy will be prosecuted. It's not a matter of if, but when. And I do believe that video will be introduced to evidence. And obviously, we both live in Los Angeles. I live a mile away from Diddy's home, very close to the Intercontinental Hotel in Century City where this all took place. But in California, at the time, 2016, we had a 3-year statute on felony assault and domestic violence. It was recently extended to 5 years. But even though the conduct is outside the statute of limitations, we know that clever prosecutors like you and I once were can get this in. I think this is what we would say is prior bad acts evidence, right? It's going to show a pattern of physical and sexual violence on the part of Diddy. And we know that the search warrant of his Los Angeles and Miami homes, that was executed by HSI agents, but it was federal prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York who went and got those search warrants. And we know that they also love a good RICO indictment. You know, they used an R. Kelly They're used in other cases as well. And as a RICO predicate act, you could use conduct that's outside the statute. So I wouldn't be surprised if an indictment is unsealed, we see RICO charges, and one of those predicate acts is this physical assault and violence that we saw.
I'm so glad that you brought that up about the predicate acts in RICO because that is something that I think it's difficult for some people to understand. We've talked on this channel before, oftentimes about prior bad acts and how it doesn't matter the statute of limitations. If you're trying to prove something like, in this case, it would have to be domestic violence, and you can show that a person has prior acts of domestic violence, you can use it, and in fact, in California, you can use it even to show that he has a predilection, is predisposed to being someone who commits acts of domestic violence. But his bigger problem, as you pointed out, is the federal case because he's being federally investigated, and if they're going to bring some sort of RICO charge or effort or theory, they can use this as well in a very similar way as a predicate act. Now, my question is that raid took place, we're going on a couple of months now or more. Why do you think it's taking so long? Do you think my feeling has always been that that wasn't the beginning of an investigation, that was towards the end of an already ongoing investigation. But why do you think they still have not indicted him?
Josh, I'm surprised. I agree with you. Federal prosecutors, they don't get a search warrant until they're close to the end. And this is why people can take off, especially people with significant means like Diddy. And I'm not saying that he's going to abscond, but there's always that risk. And evidence can disappear. So you don't want to execute a search warrant because that's going to put someone on notice that they're very likely going to get charged and charged soon. So one of two things is going on here. Either something was recovered from those raids that is sort of pushing prosecutors in another direction. I think that's unlikely because more and more victims and video evidence are coming forward. Or for some reason, they're still combing through the evidence that they seized. Now, if you believe Cassie Ventura, Diddy would record these sex acts. She said that, she was forced to have sex with male prostitutes and she was raped. Diddy would actually record it himself. And there's also allegations that he had cameras, some hidden and some not, throughout the home. So maybe agents are still combing through that. But again, I'm really at a loss. I thought Diddy should have been charged by now. I think it's a matter of days or weeks until he is. This video, which CNN did a great job of getting, by the way, I mean,
Yeah.
fantastic work, is this going to put more pressure on prosecutors to act and to act soon? I mean, this is, it sounds like one of the worst kept secrets in Hollywood. And,
Yeah.
as it's really a Me Too type situation. And I really got to think that Diddy is going to be charged and it's going to happen in a matter of days or weeks.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I felt the same way two months ago when he was first had those raids executed. I thought to myself, the federal government is media savvy enough to realize that that kind of a public raid on this high profile of a person was going to make the news circuit spin, and that they were going to have some answers for what they were going in there for. And I thought, okay, well, they knew that they were going to create a firestorm and that these charges are going to be coming very quickly. And then they haven't. Not to say, the government moves fairly slowly, so they could still be operating at a quick pace by their standards, but we just haven't seen them yet. But I think you make an excellent point that if there is a large cache of electronics and computers and cell phones and other media that needs cracking into, that might be what's taking some of the time too, is that they've got to just get into all these devices and be able to analyze all of it and get all of their ducks in a row before they bring what could be a colossal indictment. And by colossal, I mean against such a high profile person. What did you have any experience? I know you were a federal prosecutor before. Did you have experience with cases like this, RICO cases, sex cases, or no? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I mean, we have experience with RICO cases, but it's your traditional
Yeah,
drug trafficking organization, street gang, the mob, right? We're
right.
seeing RICO used in different types of cases. Some people criminal defense lawyers especially think it's being overused. Obviously, we know Trump is being charged with RICO stateside there in Georgia, but you have Nexium, right? That sex ring, R. Kelly we
Yeah.
talked about. So some folks think that RICO is being overused, but federal prosecutors, they love it for many reasons. You can bring in a lot of defendants, a lot of evidence. There's some seizures that can happen as well, prejudgment. So it's a pretty important investigative tool, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's what we see in this case. Because if you look at the allegations on the civil side, you're looking at sexual assault, you're looking at sexual abuse of minors, right? And those are not outside the statute of limitations. But then you got drugs, you got guns, and you have all these other people that at least were alleged to have helped Diddy perpetuate these sex crimes. And whether it's a Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell or R. Kelly, when you're running an enterprise like this, and what prosecutors think is a criminal enterprise, there's usually folks that are helping the perpetrator, and that's what appears to be the case here. Again, if you believe the victims, which I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And he also just in the way that he conducted his business and everything else, he was one of these people that just had an entourage of folks helping him. I think he was operating in a very different world back then that thought he was untouchable. And things have changed, my friend, and the walls are closing in.
Mm.
And I think the government's going to be coming knocking on your door any day now. But we will keep an eye on it as always and keep everyone informed. Let's move to Toms River, New Jersey, where prosecutors have rested their case against a father charged with his son's murder after allegedly forcing the 6-year-old to run on a treadmill because he was, quote, too fat. Christopher Greger faces one count of first-degree murder in the death of Corey Micciolo, who died in the hospital as a result of a combination of blunt force injuries, acute inflammation, and a heart and liver contusions. While surveillance footage taken from Greger's apartment appears to depict the father forcing Micciolo to run on a treadmill, prosecutors allege that this was only a documented incident in an ongoing history of abuse against the child. Greger's defense maintains that the boy's death was due to natural causes, however, contending that complications from pneumonia hastened the boy's death along with sepsis. In preparation for his defense, the state's final witness was a pediatric infectious disease specialist who sought to exclude natural causes as a manner of death for the child. The defense is expected to begin their case with the testimony from renowned forensic pathologist Michael Bodden. We will update you, of course, as the trial continues. Neama, we've all seen this video. It's incredibly disturbing. It's a video that, though there isn't what I would call out and out violence on it, it's incredibly difficult to watch. And my question is that even though prosecutors are not alleging that this act of violence or torture or whatever you want to call it that we're seeing in that video is actually what led to his death, do you think the jury's really going to care at the end of the day? When they see a man behave that way towards a child, do you think that there's just very little excuse they need for a conviction at that point?
Oh, I agree with you, Josh. There's no way this jury is not going to convict. The video is so disturbing. It's so awful. I mean, you see poor Corey running, but Christopher seems to be biting his head. I mean, it's terrible to watch. And that's not the only video in the case. Let's not forget when Christopher finally took him to the hospital and he was dying, he just took off. He
Yeah.
left, and there's video of him leaving while his son is dying in the hospital. And what was he doing? He was apparently texting a woman on some dating app to try to meet up with them. So there is absolutely no way, given the strength of the state's case, that we're not going to get a guilty verdict here. I don't care what Dr. Bodden says. He's very respected, but there is no possibility, in my opinion, that, the poor child died of natural causes. When you're alleging some of the other abuse that he told his doctors, right? I mean, he was saying that, he suffered these bruisings from football and things that really kind of made no sense. So I think the video is enough to convict. but not just the video of the treadmill, the video of him at the hospital. And this is no way to treat anyone, especially one's own child.
Yeah, I have said before that I think that video is the most carries the most emotional impact, but as far as connecting the dots for jurors between the actions of this man and the death of the child, the more convincing evidence I think is something like you pointed out, like his behavior afterwards. He allegedly made phone calls to Child Protective Services, trying to almost create an alibi for himself, saying that the child was told to make false statements and things like that. The guy has a lot of consciousness of guilt behavior, which is, I think, maybe like you pointed out, going to be more convincing. But you mentioned Michael Baden being respected. The guy's no slouch. I mean, he's been around for decades and considered to be a leader in his field. But do you think there is at all a problem? Because one of the charges that Gregor is facing also includes just mere child abuse and not the death itself. Do you think that there might be any convincing of them that this man was awful, he abused this kid, but you cannot connect his conduct to the death of the child?
It'd be really tough, Josh. I mean, let's kind of take a step back. Again,
Yeah,
the allegations were that, Corey's mother had a drug problem, right? And Christopher wasn't involved in his life until very recently. I think he was told about, I think he was the biological father at age 4, and I think he got involved at age 5. So maybe about a year or so, that's when the abuse started. And, you know, there's pneumonia and there's sepsis and there's infection. And there's what happened to poor Corey, which is, I mean, the things that you see in murder cases, blunt force trauma and those types of things. I don't think any defense expert is going to be able to pull the wool over the jury's eyes. I mean, maybe there's some legal Hail Mary and you maybe pick off one juror and you get a hung jury. That's always a possibility. But I would be shocked in this case. Again, I just think the video evidence is so powerful. And kind of going back to Diddy, the example I give is criminal defendants lie all the time. Experts and lawyers can try to deceive the jury. But do you know what doesn't lie? The video. And there's a
yeah,
reason Diddy apologized after 6 months when the video became public. You know, for a while he was saying this is a money grab.
yeah.
The victims were looking for a payday, all these sorts of things. They were outrageous lies. The video comes out, he's forced to apologize. And I think the same thing in, the Gregor case. The video speaks for itself. It's so powerful. I don't think the defense is going to be able to overcome it.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that if they're at all having problems back there, they're going to think about that video and they're going to think, do we really want to walk this guy out the door? Like when if they're having any kind of question in their mind, I just don't see them letting a person who is willing to put a child through that walk out the door. But we shall see. That case should be coming to a conclusion pretty soon. Like I said, they're going into the defense case. They're going to call that expert. He is actually expected to testify, but that's always a game time decision. But we will continue to watch it and keep you all updated. We move on to our final case out of San Diego, California, where a former TikTok star charged with the double murder of his wife and her friend took the stand in his own defense, contending that the killings were not premeditated. Ali Abulaban faces 2 counts of first-degree murder for the fatal shootings of his wife, Anna Abulaban, and her friend, Rayburn Barron, who were both shot to death in the luxury apartment the married couple once shared. Notably, Ali does not deny his role in the killings, contending that he was suffering increasing paranoia about his wife's infidelity, which eventually caused him to snap. Ali took the stand in his own defense, alleging that the couple's relationship was deteriorating prior to Anna asking him to move out. The man became increasingly emotional on the stand throughout his testimony and cross-examination as prosecutors drilled Ali about previous domestic incidents he allegedly perpetrated against his wife. At one point, Ali even stopped the line of questioning, asking the judge, "What happens when the question is forcing me to say something specific?" causing the judge to intervene and soothe both parties. With Ali's testimony winding down, the case will be left to the jury, and we will update you as soon as we have a verdict. Neama, did you have experience as a prosecutor with defendants taking the stand? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you think that usually works out.
It usually works out bad because they're criminal defendants. And look, you and I were former prosecutors that don't do any criminal defense work or much of it anymore. We represent
Right.
victims in civil cases. So we can say this a lot, but when a criminal defendant testifies, the entire case comes down to his or her testimony. They better knock
Yeah.
it out of the park
Yes.
because the jurors kind of set everything else aside and they focus all their attention on the defendant. And as prosecutors, we love it because it's our time to shine. For once, we get to cross-examine someone, unlike the defense attorneys.
Right.
I'm not saying he's doing well, but I actually agree with his defense strategy. I think sometimes defense attorneys, they get greedy, like in the Gregor case, right? They're trying to go for a not guilty, to knock it out of the park, attack medical causation, say that poor Corey died from something else. But I think in a case like this, it's really your only defense, right? If Ali were to come and say someone else did it or it wasn't me, there's no way. So you kind of get into this manslaughter, heat of passion type defense. I don't think that's going to work because there's such a long history of domestic violence and stalking in this case. I think the DA's office has done a good job laying all that out. But again, I think it's really the only defense that Ali has. And given the infidelity and the affair, who knows? Maybe a jury buys it.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you pointed that out. It is important to understand that they don't have to believe everything he's saying. They just have to believe enough to feel that he did, quote unquote, snap. And in the heat of passion, without that ability to contemplate and deliberate on his actions, acted in the way that he did. We will get a little bit more into why there's some problems with that in a moment, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about his behavior on the stand because he's still as we're recording this, he's still on the stand in cross-examination today. And I was watching a little bit of it. And this man, first of all, he's an absolute narcissist. That comes through clearly. I'm no psychologist, but I don't think you need a degree to diagnose that. But he also has this inability, he wants to control the situation entirely. And at one point he was being cross-examined and he didn't like the questions that were coming out. And he felt like he was being confronted with statements that he was unaware of. And he starts looking over to his attorney. And the prosecutor says, "Sir, I'm asking you the questions. You can't talk to your attorney now." And he literally said, "Can we take a break? I need to speak to you. I don't know where this is all coming from." As if he thought this was a TikTok video and he could just call cut and have a moment to discuss with his attorney. It was amazing to see. You don't see that, but it also demonstrated to me this man is a control freak. Will that behavior wash away any goodwill he may have created with the jurors explaining his situation?
I think so. The jurors think that he is not credible. He's being evasive. That's something that they're going to hold against him. And we know a lot of cases come down to the credibility and the likability of the defendant. This guy is already not likable, right?
Yeah.
At least if he came across as credible, he would have a shot potentially. But now that he's lost both, he's probably lost the jury. And I think the prosecution's cross-examination will continue to be effective and brutal and expose him for the narcissistic liar that he is.
I think you're absolutely right. They always say it's partly what you say and partly how you say it, and the way that he's delivering this is not doing him any favors. But my last point on this, the prosecutors, I thought, did a good job of pointing out that one, the whole reason he's arriving at the apartment is he's got a listening device that he's put in the home, and he hears what he feels is, for lack of a better word, canoodling between his wife and another man. So then he gets in his car, he's armed with a weapon, he drives all the way to the apartment, he goes all the way up the elevator. I mean, they even talk about the amount of time it takes to ride that elevator up to where their apartment was, walks in there with a gun. That is premeditation, isn't it? Isn't that deliberation? Isn't that cooling off period that you always talk about when dealing with voluntary manslaughter? don't those facts alone create a bigger problem for him?
It is, Josh, and you nailed it, right? The premeditation, cooling off period. We saw this, I keep bringing up other cases, but in the Nipsey Hussle murder case, they tried to
Yeah.
bring in voluntary manslaughter. The defendant was allegedly called a snitch, and I think the prosecution did a good job of saying, well, hey, you went out there, you talked to your girlfriend, you went back, you got a gun, you came back. That's not snapping. That's not heat of passion, right? That's time to reflect and all the things that you discussed. That's premeditation and that's murder. So I think you're absolutely right. I think the prosecution saw it the same way you did, laid it out for the jury. That's why I think they're going to convict on murder and not manslaughter.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it would be one thing if he didn't realize they were home, didn't have a gun, walked in to find the scene that he did, and and grabbed a kitchen knife and did something horrible. That's kind of your typical law school example of heat of passion, but not a guy who has to, not a guy who's arming himself, driving over. I mean, all of the steps and times and opportunities he had to turn around. But anyhow, I think you're right. We will again, this case should be coming to a conclusion soon. But in the meantime, Neama, that is our show for this week. It was so great seeing you again. Thank you so much for coming on. Please tell us, where can people find out more about you?
Hey, you can find me at Neama Rahmani. That's Neamarahmani on all social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, X, you name it, LinkedIn, and also my firm, West Coast Trial Lawyers, on those same platforms. Thanks, Josh, for having me. As always, pleasure to be on and to see you again.
Absolutely. It was our pleasure. And I'm your host, Josh Ritter. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. You can find our Sidebar episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and we want to hear from you. If you've got questions or comments you'd like us to address, tweet us your questions with the hashtag TCD Sidebar. And thank you for joining us at the True Crime Daily Sidebar.